Thank you very much, Shifra. I think it's indeed exciting times for private capital deal flow across the regions. Our next panel discussion is Building the World from India, Open Network for Digital Commerce. The initiative Open Network for Digital Commerce, ONDC, is aimed at controlling digital monopolies and making the industry more inclusive. The retail revolution of India has undoubtedly been led by the thriving e-commerce industry of the country. With 560 million internet users, second largest globally, increasing smartphone infiltration, the introduction of 4G networks, and growing consumer wealth, the Indian e-commerce market is anticipated to grow to $200 billion by 2026. The panel will share perspectives on how ONDC can be a game changer in creating value for stakeholders of the platform. Our esteemed speakers for this panel is Mr. Koshi, Shri Koshi T, CEO of ONDC, Mr. Amar Shankar, Partner Consulting E&Y, Rajan Anandan, Managing Director, Surge and Sequoia Capital India LLP, Sushma Kaushik, Partner Avishkar Capital, and the moderator for the panel will be Siddharth Pai, Founding Partner, CFO, ESG Officer, 314 Capital. Welcome to the panel. Hi, Siddharth.
Hi, everyone. Very good afternoon, everyone. We're just waiting for Mr. Koshi to actually join us, who is the CEO of the ONDC, and we obviously can't start off the entire conversation on the open network for digital commerce without having the architect and the founder of that entire enterprise with us. So we'll just give it a couple of minutes, and then we'll actually start. Mr. Koshi has actually joined us. Perfect, huh? So we can actually start off, huh? So good afternoon, everyone, huh? Over the past 10 years, software has actually gone from eating the world to actually remaking it in its own image. The part that software now powers almost every aspect of our life, and in case of the metaverse, it actually does become life itself. Governments across the world right now are actually coming to terms with how software is actually reshaping their remit, the way in which they govern their people, and the way in which they administer the various geographies and jurisdictions, and especially how so vulnerable the software actually leaves all of them as of now. Whereas some governments have actually gone on to create great walled gardens of technology, which actually allows them almost total and absolute control. There are several other governments that have actually sought to create a more open playground in order to democratize access via something known as digital public goods, where these are essentially like great public works that have actually been happening in the digital world and actually been open to everyone as part of it. The ONDC, or the Open Network for Digital Commerce by the DPIIT from the Government of India, is actually one such initiative of a digital public good that in turn will actually go to reshape the various transaction chains of e-commerce in India as well as the entire world. And who better than a panelist consisting of Mr. Koshi, who is our CEO of the ONDC, Mr. Amar Shankar from EY, who was just waiting to actually join us on this particular call as well, Mr. Rajan Anandan from Sequoia Capital, as well as Mrs. Sushma Kaushik from Avishkar, to actually break down this entire paradigm as of now, so that the audience and everyone can better understand what ONDC actually entails, how it's actually going to revolutionize the way we actually transact, and whether this can actually become the paradigm that India can actually seek to export to the entire world So, Mr. Koshi, my first question is actually to you. What's been the genesis of the ONDC and the thought process behind creating such an open framework in an extremely hotly contested market such as e-commerce?
Thank you. Let me set the context. As you're aware that India had been experimenting on this idea of open stack availability in various sectors. And what we are all very familiar is what we did in UPI, in the payment system 2 years ago. So we felt that the same idea is expandable, and if it is abstracted, can be adopted in multiple sectors. It so happened that the pandemic hit us 2 years ago, which suddenly brought to focus the importance of digital commerce coming forefront. And then DPIIT realized that the participation in the digital commerce, while it is very common, for the for the upper part of the upper segment of the society, still the penetration is something as low as 7-8% when it comes to the retail sale, and when it comes to suppliers, it is as low as 1 or 2%. So that's when sort of a team huddled together and said, what is the answer? And the answer they came up was the Open Network for Digital Commerce. That's how we set the stage. I'm happy to give you any further intro. And should I proceed with explaining this a little more, or would you like?
I think a brief explanation about ONDC actually entails will actually help our other help the audience better understand it, and the panelists to better contribute to the conversation as well.
Fantastic. So what I'll do is, since it's a conference of all investors, I will try to take it from the from that angle. The story is that if you really look at e-commerce, the way it is growing, is that we have few very large, fantastic platform giving fantastic service to their clients, whether it is suppliers or whether it is consumers. But so what we are thinking about is moving from a platform approach to a network approach. So why do you think it is important? Why do we think it's important? Why should you think it's important? Is that in a platform approach, we all know they have a completely integrated solution. From the seller side, servicing the seller, to the logistics, to the warehousing, to onboarding buyers and giving everything fantastic. The challenge about that is that it is a very time-consuming, resource-intensive, and both in terms of money and human resource-intensive venture. And unless you have that kind of extensive resources available, it is practically impossible for multiple entities to come in. And because of that, two things. One is this closed network with the network externalities building up will become more and more expanded, and that means competition gets limited. So while the investors in these companies will be very happy with the situation, but to a broader cross-section of innovators and investors, it is a challenge. And at the same time, the extent to which this innovation will spread across the economy is also limited. So that is why the idea of Open Network for Digital Commerce, it is making a paradigm shift from economies of scale, which is allowing few entities to become the largest in the market, to efficiency coming out of specialization and innovation, which would mean that you would see innovation and investment coming in each component of transaction, letting loose, unleashing that brain power from multiple sectors, not just limiting to few entities for any innovation, any new product introduction, or any kind of new service. And that is the thought behind. And as you can see from the platform model, when you go to the network model, you have still platforms and applications. The difference is that they can all talk to each other. Can I just go to the next slide? So if you look at the fundamental shift that this is making is two: unbundling and interoperability. What is unbundling? Very obvious, that the various components, whether it is a buyer, whether it is a service provider, whether it's a logistics provider, they can all come with their part of specialization, their kind of fantastic service. They can all be there in the network together. And for the customer, without any inconvenience, all this thing can be stitched together and given as a service. And that is possible because of the interoperability, which is also one of the fundamental principles of the Open Network for Digital Commerce. Come to the next slide. So if you go into the way, in the left side, you have, of course, the silos of the current platforms. Right side, you have the network. So let's go a little deeper. Today, let's take a company, I'm just using the name, let's say Paytm or PhonePe. They have a large cohort of customers whom they are providing service for their financial services. Supposing they want to bring in e-commerce, the only way for them is to, one, give them an e-commerce front end, and two, bring all the sellers onto their in their network. Otherwise, their buyers will have nothing to buy. Whereas if the open ONDC is alive and moving forward, they only need to make their buyer platform ONDC compliant, and then yuppie, all the sellers are visible. So each of the entities who have ability, who already have a large client base of digital client base, or have potential to bring a specialized client base, will have the opportunity to expose their client to all the sellers. And that means the scale is naturally available when it comes to whether it is seller or whether it is buyer. And that is a big, big difference. Come to the next slide. So if you go a little more detail, just to help you guys understand, then you can ask questions. If you look at the rectangle in the middle, today that's the platform offered by the few fantastic entities that we have in the market. They have their buyer side integration application, seller side integration application, and the switching system in the middle, which is like all these things together is a black box, and we only know either as a buyer or a seller. So tomorrow when the ONDC is there, we have each of those components are separate building blocks available for each innovators to come on with their own solutions, providing services, and the gateway in the middle, which is going to broadcast all the buyer requests coming from any buyer application to all the relevant sellers. So that's the beauty of the idea. And for that, ONDC will have to provide some common services to get this community work together. One is we need to have a discipline of who is coming in. That's a registry. Second thing, there should be a mechanism of certification, say that the people who come in are suitably qualified with respect to their processes and their technology. Third is, how are they performing? It's creating a network-wide reputation ledger. So that's the only way we can retain the trust in those enterprises. So these are the kind of broad services that the ONDC will provide. And as the network orchestrator, ONDC will also have the responsibility to ensure that all the network players, behave in the network as a disciplined party, and we can track their, discipline through a set of network policies that is also a common resource made available. And to a great extent, these network policies are programmable. It means that enforcement and tracking becomes very, very automatic as a community. And in that way, the community can always expect certain disciplined behavior and service. So this in total is the way that we have conceived the open network for digital commerce. We are very happy to see a large number of already existing players already under various stages of integration. And when we did a hackathon last year, as you're aware, we had more than 140 participants coming, and from on the right side, the biggest one like Microsoft, and very small startup coming with some fantastic solutions which are all being adopted by some entities or the other. So that's what we are seeing as ONDC. Over to you, Siddharth.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think that's actually a fantastic overview of ONDC and actually sets context for the remaining part of our conversation as of now, especially in terms of the interplay between how investors can actually view this and how people have to start changing their theses, not just for existing players, but as well as for the new players that are actually coming in, that are actually coming in as well. So Rajan, I would actually, speaking on behalf of the investors, I'd actually like to go to you as of now as a powerhouse behind Sequoia Surge, which is one of the largest early seed programs in India currently. What would your advice actually be to the entrepreneurs looking to actually enter into the hotly contested e-commerce market space as of now, given the fact that ONDC is coming onto the horizon? That's number one. And number two, for the existing players who are already there as part of the market and have already invested millions of dollars into their own services and to actually create their entire moat when it comes to other players. How should they actually look at ONDC as of now to ensure that they can actually leapfrog onto it rather than actually end up getting disrupted by it by a very large extent?
Yeah, thanks, Sid. Great to be here. Look, maybe I'll start with your second question first, Sid. What you see every time there's a disruption, right? Innovators' dilemma kicks in, right? So the leading players at the time always will ignore sort of a new disruptive innovation until it gets to be quite late, and then some of them jump on it and then make it, and others don't. And I think ONDC. This I think is a very, very exciting initiative. But in many ways, once it's evolved, will become the UPI moment of e-commerce in India, right? I genuinely do believe that. So Mr. Koshi and his team were kind enough to walk the Sequoia partnership through exactly what this is, and we are very, very excited about this. So I think what we'll see is, the leading players will be a bit reluctant, I think, initially. I don't know whether the leading players are already embracing this platform. And I think it's just natural. It's just natural, anytime there's sort of something like this, which can be quite, very, very disruptive to an existing business model. I think it's quite natural. But I do think, what you will see, I mean, in many ways, the simplest way I think about this is any consumer platform that has large distribution, right? You can think about content platforms, services platforms, payments platforms now can enable e-commerce, very, very quickly, right? Which is very tough to do. I mean, a number of these payments platforms have tried to do commerce, but they've struggled because of all the challenges with getting merchants on board and figuring out logistics and all of these kinds of things. So I do think we will see a number of, I think the intent here is to democratize commerce, both from the consumer interface standpoint, but also for the tens of millions of merchants in India. And I think it will do that. But I do think the early winners will likely be some mix of, on the consumer side, it'll be players who have large distribution, I think some of the ones that have already started partnering with ONDC. So I think that's the first thing. I think from an investor standpoint, your first question, I mean, that was question number 2. I think on your first question, Siddharth, look, I think the investable opportunities will probably be at the enabler side, right? Which is how do you actually make all this stuff work, right? If you want to get tens of millions of merchants, somebody's got to do that, right? And historic, to date, I don't think anybody's got anywhere close to that scale. So it creates opportunities for both, I think, some of the existing players to build out this capability and ramp very quickly, as well as, new companies could emerge, right? And then I think, if you look at all the other parts of this, right, how do you get the logistics? How do you stitch up all the logistics players together? How do you stitch up all the, finance providers together? Well, how do you think about payments in this in this sort of new world, right? So I think the enablers, I would say, is probably the first big near-term opportunity. And then over time, as this network gets built out, we will probably also see sort of a new generation of consumer front-end commerce companies. But that might be sort of a phase 2 because, as India goes from, in many ways, like the first phase of e-commerce was the current big horizontal players, e-commerce, Flipkart, Amazon. One could argue the second was the vertical players like Nykaa, Lenskart. Third phase is social commerce companies like Dealshare, etc. And I think the fourth phase of Indian e-commerce that will really take commerce to probably the, from currently 150 million users to call it 500 million users will very likely be new generation of front-end players that will leverage all this back-end infrastructure that's going to be built out to do that. So long answers to your questions, but that's sort of how we think about it.
No, that's actually very true because especially there is no actually short answer to a question like this, which is actually going to set the stage for an entire decade in terms of an investment thesis. I think your insights they've actually given us right about now will actually shape how a number of investors actually look at this and how entrepreneurs also tackle this particular problem. Now, Sushma, coming over to you. As of now, all of us know what the issues with e-commerce have actually been. And Mr. Koshi also actually spoke about it, where e-commerce is basically for the select few, whereas commerce is actually there for everyone throughout the entire chain itself. And one of the biggest issues that people have actually faced in terms of getting onto e-commerce as of now are the extremely high barriers that an entity needs to have, in order to get into that entire transaction chain. Now, with the rise of ONDC and what Mr. Koshi has actually spoken about, what are the features you believe that ONDC should have, or ONDC can actually incorporate to ensure that even if it's Bharat, or even if it's the tier 3, tier 4 cities, villages, and all for that matter, they can have access to the same level of services as what a person sitting in a metro has. And even if there's a small artisan sitting in some corner of India, they can actually sell their products throughout the entire country itself, and actually benefit from this revolution that's happening in the country currently.
No, absolutely, Siddharth, and thank you, Mr. Koshi, for walking us through the entire architecture of what you are planning. And I think this is extremely disruptive for the other India, which we call Bharat, right? So, as Rajan mentioned, the first set of e-commerce players were all targeting the top quartile of the population who could afford to transact online. And however, what we saw during COVID was there was a significant surge in the number of users who were transacting online. And actually, there's a report which says that most of these users came from tier 2, tier 3 cities and towns, and rural India is also catching up. We also have seen that there's an evolution to a digital first customer, right? So they start with consuming information, entertainment, social media, all of that. Only once they are slightly comfortable with them to, for transactions, and then the online buying behavior takes over. So I think, while ONDC is putting all the pipes in place, the Bharat customer is readying themselves to transact on a platform or on a network like this, and we see that this, as you rightly said, is a 10-year kind of architecture where we will see the benefits of what is being built today in full effect in a few years to come. And absolutely, I see huge efficiencies that will kick in terms of customer acquisition cost is one of the biggest hurdles that most e-commerce players play. We will see a lot of innovative products that would come in where CACs will not be a problem. Unit economics will be better. We will see probably lesser mortalities in many of our portfolio companies because at least the unit economics are more robust. We've always seen that in e-commerce, winner takes it all seems to be the buzz, right? And everyone is trying to corner their set of customers. But with this kind of a network, it really democratizes the entire commerce ecosystem and will open up the space for a lot more players to participate. And that's what we see as inclusion as well, right? So when you're allowing for more and more the wider set of population to participate in trade, in commerce, in market activities, that is when the economy will also grow sustainably.
Very true, very true. And I think Amar, I'm actually coming on to you now. So a large number of people are actually used to the government being a dislocator of business as opposed to a disruptor of business. And I think what ONDC is actually doing now is actually disrupted a large number of the incumbent players who are already there. And you as a person who's actually worked with a large number of the incumbents who've actually been in the e-commerce industry for a while, some of the larger houses who are actually looking to get into e-commerce, as of now, since the entire field is actually being reset currently, what would your advice actually be to the established players who've actually sunk in large investments into their own proprietary systems as of now, in order for them to actually get and sort of adopt to this sort of new playing field that ONDC actually comes up with? Because the modes of data that they've actually had and the select sellers and the buyers that they have within their own wall gardens right now are actually being disintermediated to a very, very large extent. I would love to get your thoughts on that.
So I think so that one thing that all of us agree is that the market is really large, right? And the people who have been playing in that is it's a very small portion. So I think given that, even for existing players, I mean, for them to capture the next quartile or the next quartile requires much larger investments, right? To kind of do buyer as well as seller acquisition. So I think ONDC, and Koshi, thanks for kind of sharing what you did, because that's the kind of disruptor which will only help in pooling of resources to do this sort of customer acquisition. I think the second point that I'd make is that the existing platforms will also be able to capture a bigger market because they'll get to still monetize on the transactions that are happening. People may not enter into a transaction through the black box that exists today, but it is, so there's a greater business opportunity to kind of leverage. And I would say the third thing is that, till now, people have been focusing on shifting numbers, getting in more buyers, getting in more sellers. I think that is going to shift on the kind of services they offer, and they will continue to, leverage in becoming preferred service providers for that particular service. So I think from numbers, it's going to shift to the quality of service, which is ultimately going to benefit not just the consumers, but also a huge number of, small, medium enterprises, which will partake in this revolution. I also think that, today the open network concept is, it's not just restricted to retail sector. It may happen. It may start from there. And I think Rajan mentioned that it's going to evolve. I think the use cases and benefits can be extended to any digital commerce domain, including wholesale, mobility, delivery, logistics, travel, services, and both B2C as well as B2B. So the way I read it, and Koshi presented this to the EY partnership, we all see this as an opportunity for e-commerce to actually just suddenly, grow. And we are probably at that tipping point. It might take time, but probably not as much as we would otherwise envisage, because the concept is really to democratize e-commerce.
Very true. So we're moving from e-commerce to actually inclusive commerce as of now. I think the nearest parallel that we've actually seen happen when it comes to this has actually been the UPI framework, where UPI has actually gone to create almost everyone UPI has actually gone to recreate the way everyone actually makes payments and everything online. I think the aha moment for UPI, besides obviously demonetization that actually happened, was the fact that zero MDR actually became the norm. So the cost of transactions actually became close to zero, especially from the customer side. And because the system is actually so robust, the cost of actually maintaining the system is also extremely small compared to the large volume of transactions that actually ends up happening. So this is a question actually open to the entire panel as of now. What would you actually believe would be the zero MDR moment for ONDC to actually scale up the same way that UPI actually did? Mr. Koshi, I think we can actually start with you on that.
So, let me start by saying, while zero MDR definitely helped, but that is not what triggered. If you look at the numbers, when zero MDR was, I think, introduced in 2020, by the time UPI had reached significant amount of volume. Okay, so I will not say that is what triggered, but the message is what was the offer was the one big change, and then zero MDR in certain way helped. So so in our case, it's like we are not going into any of those deciding on who should charge what. What I believe is going to really give impetus is a couple of things. One is that, like Rajan beautifully explained, it is going to be the initial set of the people who are already in digital commerce is going to come by adopting that. So it's pretty easy for them. It's a very straight cakewalk. And then everybody will ask question, what's the big deal? They're doing what is the big difference it's made? Okay, how it's going to affect anybody. But the real big difference will come when the VVC, like somebody pointed out earlier, the small merchants, etc., coming from some parts of the India, is able to make his product equally visible without being a part of the large established platform, but by a very innovative platform brought out by a startup, who is sort of very focused on the sector that is bringing business. Let's say a very specialized handloom sari coming from Kanjipuram. I'm just making up stuff. And he has a very, very defined way of making this product visible. He doesn't have to worry how the buyer will come. So when a few of those things happen, it is going to really unleash the power of the small and medium enterprises. In fact, that's the reason ONDC has taken a mandate. We only need to create a protocol and digital rail for the biggies. They'll take care of themselves. So what we have done is to work very, very closely with multiple entities who could actually help these small and medium and micro enterprises to come online. And also for two things to be done. One, educating them, giving them solutions, somebody sort of even investing and giving all the drive, as well as making sure that the logistics guys are there completely there. So we have started working with multiple states and entities like SIDBI and NABARD and so on and so forth. As one of our first mandate that we are taking our developmental role, while we are looking at the technology enablement role differently, development role is to make it happen. And in fact, I am in one of the states talking to the highest authorities about how they could encourage. There is no governmental decision needed. They need to only encourage. They need to only explain this thing to them and get some of these platforms who are already investing in to come and say that, hey, we have some very, very cool thing for you guys there. So no, that is a process. And I believe that in the next few months' time, we will see success in terms of actual demonstration, not theoretical possibilities, of some few people finding their markets nationwide, which otherwise they could have thought of. And I think that is going to be a big impetus. And that is when the point of inflection will come. Till then, it is like business as usual.
Good. So I think that's perfect. And the way you put it forward to actually enable the smaller merchants to actually come onto the platform without any added incentives is actually great, because the e-commerce battle over the past 8 years in India has always been punctuated by two constant facts. Number one being extremely large amounts of capital has actually been raised, and number two, equally large discounts that have actually been given over to the entire system now. So Rajan, Sushma, Amar, this question is actually to you. Given the fact that ONDC is actually coming in now to actually create a level playing field as part of it, where these sort of wall gardens won't actually exist to a large extent, what role would these large amounts of discounts actually end up playing in terms of the interplay with the ONDC framework? Would love to get your thoughts on that. Rajan, maybe we can start off with you on that.
Yeah, I think. Look, so if you separate, there are 650 million internet users in India today, right? Monthly active users. About 150 million of them buy products. About 280 million of them pay with digital payments, and the rest of them don't transact online, right? So today, if you look at it, the first 150 million already buy online, right? So they're like all of us probably on this call. And I think the first set of users who will buy on, let's say, ONDC-enabled sites, let's just call them that, right? Whether it's sort of content sites, payment sites, etc., will be these users, or it'll be the 250 million or 280 million digital payments users. I think for the remaining users, right, which is, call it the next 200, 300 million users, I do think discounts will play a role, but possibly not as much, Siddharth, because my view is to really unlock commerce in India, you have to hit a 200 to 300 rupee price point, right? Which is what players like DealShare and others are doing today. And which is the real unlock for commerce in India is 200 rupees. I mean, if you ask me, zero MDR was the magic number for payments. The magic AOV for India unlock of e-commerce is 200 rupees, right? And I mean, can you discount that by 10 rupees? Yeah, sure. But if it's 400 rupees, you discount by 200 rupees. I mean, there's no venture capital firm in the world, including SoftBank, that can fund that company, right? So that's sort of how I look at it. I think what ONDC I'm hoping will enable is to get to those kinds of price points without having to, burn $50 million a month, right? Because when you're burning $50 million a month, those numbers add up very quickly. Now, going back, it's a very interesting question that you ask on what is that, zero MDR moment for payments. I haven't really thought about it, but the way I sort of think about it is, I think it's when we can get a large number of these merchants today that are not transacting online, that are not on these platforms, right? So call it, there's 10 million to 12 million, offline small retailers. If we can get several million of them, and by the way, most of them now, if you look at Paytm's network or PhonePe's network, most of them are actually doing their digital, meaning they do, QR code-based payments, right? So if you can get all of them online, and that's actually the hard part of this problem, right? Because then you'll see sort of massive explosion, because they are the ones, right? They are the ones who can actually deliver that 200 rupee product. I mean, if you have to go through central warehousing and ship across states and all of that, the math is never going to work, right? And that's why, this hyperlocal commerce companies or these social commerce companies are able to at least, I mean, they're still not contribution margin positive, but they get pretty close, because they're essentially, you're talking about local commerce, right? So I think if we can get, and maybe that's the question that, we should all think about, which is on the magic here is to get the supply side. Because when you get the supply side, the demand side is going to happen, because we know India has, massive amounts of demand. So I think that is, I don't know what that magic number is, in million merchants, 2 million merchants, 3 million merchants. We will get to X million merchants. And when that happens, I think, Sid, we will see just a massive, it'll just take off. And that will be that equivalent of the payments moment.
If I can just build on that, and I think Koshi's covered it, but if you really look at the local commerce, right? I mean, today the problem is that you do have these sites or these companies or these apps which are highly localized, but they don't really have the power to meet, do the transactions by getting in the user base. Through ONDC compliant networks, right? They will suddenly get that power. They will be fueled by that power, because they will be then, whoever registers with them will be able to kind of take it to anybody, to you and me, right, as we transact. So I think if we are able to create those early successes, the art of possible, literally, I think that would be the inflection point. And just to kind of build on what Rajan said, it is that some of these guys are already, I mean, it's not that they're digitally illiterate. I mean, we do have this huge notion sometimes. I mean, they are working on QR codes. Their payments are fairly, digitally enabled. I think it's just a question of them coming to this marketplace, and ONDC will kind of show the signs and the routes and the signage and the traffic lights for them to get there. I don't personally, if you ask me, I'm fairly gung over this. I believe that this is going to happen in a matter of months, and certainly not years.
So if I can just add here, I do see that this could be extremely disruptive, and what most of the first gen e-com players took 8 years, 9 years to achieve. With this kind of an architecture, we would be able to see it in maybe half the time. And the reason I say that is many things have fallen in place, right? So if you see, as Amar was mentioning, it's not like the local Kirana guy is not digitally aware, right? They are still transacting. There are digital transactions that are happening. Where they are disadvantaged is they do not have a digital sourcing channel, right? Or they're not able to capture their customers online or fulfill the requirements online. So what I think ONDC will be very effective in doing is solving for that part of the problem. It's not that these people don't know or they are not digital natives. They very much are. They are very familiar with the whole digital ecosystem. It's just now they don't know how to go looking for buyers, sellers, fulfillment agents, and the other ecosystem players. And that's exactly what ONDC is doing. And that's why if it has taken 8 to 9 years of billions of dollars that have gone behind the first gen e-com players, we will not be requiring that kind of capital, and we will be requiring half the time. And that's when you will see the aha moment, right? So we have about 12 million Kirana shops, of which I believe only 15 or 1,000 are actually buying and selling online. That number will really take off in a big way when something like this is put into effect.
Very true, Sushma. I think all of us can agree that India, nobody can actually accuse India of being a digitally illiterate nation at all. I mean, for that matter, I think all of us can recall, I think in 2018 or 2019, where during New Year's, India was the one that actually bought down WhatsApp servers worldwide because of the sheer volume of information we actually sent through in a very, very short span of time itself. And indeed, if it's a valley that's actually built for the first 1 billion Indian users, it stands to reason that India will be the country that actually built for the next 6 billion users. And India already has. I mean, with products such as Aadhaar, with products such as UPI, and now with ONDC as of now, the India stack that's actually been created actually serves as a sort of non-aligned tech stack for a very, very bipolar tech world as of now. So one of the thoughts I would actually love to hear from all of you as of now is whether India can actually look at packaging all these particular digital public goods and actually exporting them throughout the entire world. Because in the bipolar tech world that we have now, where one side actually consists of China and the way China has actually grown its entire tech ecosystem, and the other being the US, where US has had the first mover advantage for a very, very long period of time. And they've fundamentally written the way the entire world actually transacts online. India sort of emerged as this non-aligned way of actually taking the best of both worlds and adding a very unique Indian twist to it. Would love to get your thoughts also on whether these kind of India stacks can actually end up being exported worldwide, so the entire world can actually start to benefit from the technology revolution that's actually encompassing the entire world. Amar, maybe we can actually start off with you on this one.
Sorry, absolutely. No, so I think India has already witnessed the success of digital UPI that has helped new age technologies and reaching common man at affordable prices. And open networks have already been implemented through UHI and ONDC, and millions of citizens, even in limited resource settings, are really getting the benefit of it. So I totally subscribe that this whole democratization of technology, given our scale and given where we are, and given the frugality of things, I think is a very, very strong narrative. But I would say that there is a word of caution. Even as we get ready for open source movement, the implementation of such networks must adopt a principled approach. And, in such implementations, the role of the government and the community becomes extremely important. It must be, ensured that data privacy is, ensured with the right amount of anonymization, security protocols, and the network grows accordingly. And I guess the role that ONDC is seeking to provide in that, particularly when it comes to e-commerce, is a classical, way to kind of imagine this. Because if we get that right, then what you said, Siddharth, I mean, it's absolutely something which we can. I mean, we've got a lot more examples, right? We've got on the health side, we've got the digital ID, Aadhaar platforms, etc. So I think there is a lot of opportunity. But yeah, from an implementation standpoint, we just need to be a little careful.
Right. Rajan, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think India has extraordinary opportunity to take our tech, this sort of what we call the India stack, and make it for the stack of the world. So I think, Siddharth, what I would do is I would go hire the best leaders from companies like TCS and Infosys and create the India stack business unit. And much like Deepak Bagla, who built Invest India to attract capital into India, I would kill India's absolute best enterprise sellers. All the sellers and all the GMs who run these government-focused business units. I'm sure Amar has folks at EY and so on. And I would build a team of 50 and give them an OKR. By 2025, we want you to land the India stack in 55 countries. And they better all be meaningful countries, right? Not some little country in Africa. So, I mean, and Africa is great, but you know what I mean? Countries of substance. So I think we should absolutely do that. I mean, it's phenomenal, this entire India stack. And in many ways, right, the ONDC is another layer of the India stack. And this is going to get built out for the next decade. It's going to be India's single most important competitive advantage.
Very true, and hopefully, maybe someday DPIT will actually become the Department for Promotion of Indian Information Technology. I think in a series of time that may actually end up happening also as part of that. I think when the last 5 minutes of our conversation as of now, but the one thing I would actually love to get everyone's thought is, now that we have a much better grounding of ONDC as of now, what are the other sectors where we can actually apply this sort of Indian approach to open source to actually create these digital public goods as of now that can actually better serve not just India, but actually serve as a paradigm for the rest of the world to actually end up adopting as well. Because one of the things that's actually on the forefront of everyone's mind, especially as of now with the situation that's happening in Europe and everything, and the swiftness with which countries have actually been excluded from the entire global transaction chain as part of it. Having this sort of open source approach or something to actually come in as of now as a means of ensuring digital sovereignty actually becomes very, very crucial in the minds of governments as well. So what are the other sectors you believe this kind of approach can actually end up getting applied as of now? And maybe that can actually set the context for what somehow maybe some technologists in Bangalore or some other place in India will actually end up creating, which will actually become like ONDC or like UPI for that matter.
So Siddharth, if I might just go very quickly here, is, if someone is able to build in India for India, which is one of the most complex social problems that we face, because we are so diverse geographically as well as ethnically, very, very diverse. If someone is able to build solutions for Indians, it can very well be replicated in multiple geographies, right? So a stack that can solve for an India problem is actually multiple countries rolled into one. And so it will easily go into an Africa or anywhere else. So, but also if you were to look at some of the big sectors ripe for disruption, of course, the top of mind is healthcare, agri. There's a big need for agri, and across countries, across geographies, you will see the agri supply chain being very, very broken. So if someone is able to solve for the agri supply chain problem in India, it can very well be applied across the globe. And so these two would be my top picks if I were to think that something open source can be built. It could.
Perfect. Amar, yours? Your top 2 or 3 picks for areas that can actually end up getting disrupted.
Well, I think the United Health Interface, I mean, you've already spoken about, but I would say that the Open Credit Enablement Network, OCEN, I mean, probably was amongst the first to start. I still think that there's a huge lot that can be done. Transport could be another one with mobility coming through. City of Kochi has already implemented its first of its kind mobility network where passengers can discover, book rides in any mode of transportation. So, I think, if we were to kind of apply our minds, we would find use cases across some of the big problems that we have. And they are viable. It's not that they are not viable. I think such examples, the success of UPI, hopefully the success of ONDC will kind of pave way for many more coming. But yeah, very quickly, those would be my other couple.
Okay. Rajan, yours? This will be the most exciting because you're actually seeing what's happening on the cutting edge because of the search program that you guys have as of now. Very, very eager to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I have two thoughts on this. I think the first thing is we should make sure India doesn't miss the boat on the most open, most democratized global technology infrastructure that's being built now, right? Which is called blockchain. Every single Web3 Indian founder is moving to the capital, the Web3 capital of India now is Dubai. Yeah. Right. So first thing we should do is make sure that all our entrepreneurs don't leave and move to another country. I think it's very important. Otherwise, Dubai becomes actually the most important. If you think about open sourcing, etc. I think the other one is it's not a particular sector, but the way I think about it is, Aadhaar basically gave a unique ID to every human, right? But on a specific dimension, right? Like an ID. We should look at all the basic needs, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, etc., and make sure that those human profiles are built, but they're very secure. They're very limited, but they can be leveraged, right? And similarly, I would look at all professions, right, that are important. So the health stack, farmers, right? Can't we have, for instance, I heard the animal husbandry, department has this whole initiative of giving every cattle in India a unique ID. This is very exciting, Sid. So think about it. There's 300 million cattle in India. Imagine if every cattle had a unique ID. Actually, apparently it's happening. So, and we have a company called Animal that is an online cattle trading platform. I mean, the opportunities become infinite, right? If that happens for companies like Animal. So whether it's trucks, whether it's cars, whether it's buses, think about every important living and non-living object, right? That is material, meaning it plays a very important role in our lives. And can we really sort of give these unique IDs and build these open architecture frameworks, etc.? Because I think in the next 20, 30 years, right, we could build so much. I mean, think about it, right? I mean, ONDC, I think Mr. Toshi and his team are doing a fantastic job. I mean, what if we deploy, let's come up with another, big idea, right? What if we deploy the 10,000 smartest Indian engineers, designers, and architects into, let's call it 10 or 20 different projects like this, right? Imagine what could happen. I mean, it would just be explosive. So it's not one particular sector, but let's make sure we don't lose Web3 because currently we are losing Web3 by the minute. And second, let's think expansively about this topic.
Very true. Mr. Koshi, the entire conversation has actually been about ONDC. We'd love to get your closing thoughts on ONDC as well as the other sectors you believe the ONDC paradigm can actually end up getting applied as well.
In a short time, I'm just trying to add, in addition to all the sectors that we talked about, two more things that is already work is starting. One is education, another is skill and employment. That together is also using the similar kind of platform. And I think that is also a fundamental area where we have demonstrated. And in fact, the Diksha platform that we have more than 100 million students using is an excellent example. And World Bank has already been sort of trying to take it in different parts of the world. But one point I want to just add to complement everything, like Rajan said, we have the capability and the strength to develop all these things. But when it comes to internationally adoption of such kind of open source and common digital platforms and infrastructure, etc., it has to be a joint game by the government and the business together. And that's what I see. I've been working on many of the international projects, not just on ONDC, on the other areas before. And I see that in most of the countries, they actually do it. And that is where we have not yet learned how to play the tango with both of us together, trying to take it, because, in this kind of thing, we are very good in making a product and selling, which is doing fine. But in terms of a joint strategy to take this, which is what all the countries, whether it's US or whether it's Japan or whether it's somebody else, and that is where we have not yet found that magic connection and that strategy.
Very true. And I think India's soft power diplomacy should also translate to a software power diplomacy as well. I think that's actually going to set the tone for the entire coming decade. So with that, everyone, I would love to thank all my panelists for their very erudite thoughts on the ONDC framework. And with that, I would like to hand it back to the IBCA organizers to actually to carry this forward. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.